We all know it's important to protect our skin from the sun, but sunscreen is just one way to do that. So in this video, I'm talking about all the ways that are not sunscreen that you can protect your skin, including my favorite hats and UPF clothing. I'm Dr. Sam Ellis, and I'm a board-certified medical and cosmetic dermatologist in Northern California. I'm here to help you understand your skin and find products that work for you. So if that sounds good, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. When it comes to thinking about sun protection, I always refer to Australia's Slip, Slop, Slap, Seek, Slide campaign. So this refers to slip on UPF protective clothing, slop on sunscreen, slap on a hat, seek shade, and slide into UV protective sunglasses. So let's start off with the slip into UPF clothing part of this, because I get asked all the time about my favorite UPF clothing, what that means, how to determine what works for you, and we'll talk about it today. So UPF is kind of similar to SPF, but for clothing, and it stands for UV protective factor. And essentially what this measures is how much UV radiation goes through your clothing and reaches your skin. And UPF gauges how effective fabric is at protecting you from both UVA radiation and UVB radiation. And I think this is important to note because when you compare UPF to the SPF that you see on a sunscreen bottle, for example, SPF really only measures UVB, where you get the UVA and UVB with a UPF rating. So there are a few different factors that determine a UPF rating for an item of clothing or an accessory. So first up is the construction type. So dense, tight construction is going to minimize how much UV radiation can pass through. Think of like a denim jacket versus what I'm wearing today, for example, where there are little holes in between the sweater loops. Another thing that can determine the UPF rating is the color of fabric. So the darker the color, the less UV radiation that can pass through. Another thing that can determine the UPF factor is any treatments of the fabric itself. There are certain chemicals that you can wash or prep fabrics in to make them more absorptive of UV light. The specific fiber or material of a product also makes a really big difference. So for example, nylon and polyester are excellent at reducing UV exposure to skin. Shiny polyesters and even lightweight silks can be very protective because of their ability to reflect that UV light. Now, if you compare that to other fabrics like cotton and rayon and hemp, those are not as good at reflecting or protecting from UV radiation, and they often score low on a UPF rating unless they're treated with a chemical. The fit of the clothing also makes a difference. So loose-fitting clothing where you have a little bit of redundancy in the fabric can be more protective. If you have something that's tight or that's stretched across your skin, you can reduce the UPF. So overall, when you're looking at something and trying to determine its UPF, you're looking at construction, color, treatment, fiber type, and fit. But honestly, it's not really up to you to determine the UV protection factor. The same way you're not determining this for your sunscreen, there are actual people who grade these and test products to make sure that they have the UPF that you're expecting. And so when you buy something that has a UPF label, you know you're getting protected. So what kind of ratings should you be looking for? When something is labeled as UPF 50, that means that it is blocking out 98% of UV radiation, or 1/50th of the UV radiation that you're exposed to is reaching your skin. Now, even if you're wearing something that has a UPF rating, there are a couple things that can affect the effectiveness of that clothing item. So one thing is how wet your fabric is. Usually when fabrics are wet, they are much less protective, although there are some studies that show that polyester may become more protective when wet. Another thing that's important to note is the wear on the fabric. So when a piece of clothing or a hat is brand new and the weave is nice and tight, it's going to be its max UPF that's rated. But as that fabric wears down, as it's worn over time, you might lose some of that UPF protection. And then again, like I mentioned before, fit is so important. So if a product no longer fits you, it's really tightly stretched across your body, it's time to let it go. Now, when it comes to caring for your UPF items, it's really important to follow what the label says, because they're going to give you very specific instructions on what they want you to do. Especially if you purchase a UPF garment that has been treated with a chemical to help protect you from UV, it'll usually state on there how many washes it lasts before you lose that UPF protection. And even things that are not chemically treated, sometimes they can only sustain a certain number of washes or wears before they are less protective. Now, before we jump into specific UPF clothing recommendations, I do want to talk about what if a garment you have doesn't have a UPF rating? Like, what do you do? How do you kind of evaluate that? Because the reality is you don't have to go out and buy a full wardrobe of UPF clothing. Sometimes that is nice because you know that you're getting guaranteed protection, but a lot of people also have things that protect them from the sun without being UPF. You can just imagine some people walking out there with severe tan lines. Obviously, there are certain parts of their skin that are not getting as much UV. So things you can do, you can can look for darker fabrics because again, those are going to offer more protection than lighter ones. You also want to look for things that are a denser weave. So for example, it's estimated that a denim jacket has somewhere around a UPF of 1700. And of course that is way more than you could ever need. But my sort of litmus test is if you take a piece of fabric or your clothing or whatever, and you hold it up to the light and you see no light passing through, that's going to protect your skin. And then the last thing is you can look for certain types of fabrics. So nylons and polyesters are going to protect your skin more than natural fibers like hemp or flax or cotton. And just for reference, because I feel like a lot of people use this as a clothing staple, a white cotton t-shirt has a UPF of around 7. And if you get it wet, it has a UPF of around 3. So yes, your day-to-day clothing can offer you some protection, but as you can see, like some clothing is more reliable than others. All right, time for the specific product recommendations. I have a lot of them. I am a UPF clothing connoisseur, and I feel like I've filtered out through a lot of bad UPF clothing to get sort of my capsule UPF wardrobe. Let's start with shirts and tops. So first up is the Skin V Solara crop top. I love this because it's essentially like a sleeveless cropped turtleneck. And you might go, okay, when would I ever wear that? But it's so nice to layer under things. I have a lot of patients who have a tremendous amount of sun damage on their neck and chest. And they're like, Dr. Ellis, I always have my chest covered. I wear high-necked t-shirts, but sometimes that's not enough. Or they play tennis or golf. They're out on the courts and a lot of those kind of athletic tops dip low. And so you can layer this under a lot of different things to get additional protection. It's also probably my number one recommendation for post-procedure. A lot of my patients still want to go out and hike and they're wearing a wide brim hat, but this can be a really nice thing to layer under your jackets or your other shirts to ensure that your chest and your neck are totally protected. Another UV top that I really like is the Soleil Sunwear cropped hoodie. I really love this hoodie. It's kind of fitted on the arms and then a little bit looser around the trunk and breast area. So it's very comfortable to wear on a hike. You get a little bit of breeze through it. I also think this one is pretty cool because it has this great hood that you can pair with a baseball cap. So I'll talk about this later, but baseball caps are not my favorite for UV protection, but this allows you to wear a baseball cap and then kind of clip the hood over it or around it, and you get that kind of side protection that you wouldn't normally have. Oh, and one thing I should note before I move on with more products, you'll probably notice that UPF clothing is a lot pricier than sort of traditional similar products. And a lot of that is because there's additional testing that goes into these fabrics, but also these are performance wear pieces. And I don't think you need as many UPF items as I personally have, but it's really nice to have just a few core things that you can rely on when you're spending additional time outdoors. Another sun protection brand that I really love and I use a ton of their stuff is Solbari. So I probably have, 5 or 6 Solbari things at this point. I really like their men's base layer t-shirts. I like the men's because they're a little bit more loose fitting, so I can just kind of wear them very comfortably, even on a hot day, because that's usually the biggest gripe people give me when I tell them they need to wear long sleeves. They're like, Dr. Ellis, it's so hot outside. But if you get something that's really lightweight and a little bit more loose fitting, it's just as cooling and really not that different from wearing a tank top. I really like the Solbari quarter zip top. I feel like that's a little bit sporty. My golfing patients really like that one, as well as my tennis players. And then I also really like their sort of sensitive skin cotton t-shirts. So I mentioned before, cotton isn't always the most protective, but these are nice because they don't feel like a performance fabric. They just feel like a cozy long sleeve. And so they're really great for things like camping or when you're outside and it's sunny, but it's maybe a little bit cooler. Another UPF clothing brand that I really like is called Block UV. I really like their long sleeve. I think I have their mock neck quarter zip as well. I just like having a few different options. The mock neck is particularly nice because it's a little bit more loose fitting. So if you want to tuck it into pants, or it's really good for maternity, it's a great item. Coolie Bar, which is probably one of the most well-known UPF clothing brands, makes really good long sleeve t-shirts. So I definitely have a few of those as well. And then lastly, while I'm on the topic of tops, I did want to give a shout out to the rash guard from Land's End. I've tried a bunch of different rash guards, which I essentially just wear in the pool when I'm with my son or when I go to the beach. But the one from Land's End is super, super lightweight. It's very thin, but still quite protective. And I just find it to be the most comfortable and I don't feel suffocated in it when it's wet. I actually prefer wearing a rash guard over a bikini or a one piece rather than wearing a long sleeved swimsuit. I definitely have some long sleeve swimsuits, but I find that you feel a bit trapped in those. Whereas if you just have a rash guard that you put on over your swimsuit, then when you're out of the pool or out of the water and you're in the shade, you can take it off and dry off and you're less constricted. Let's move over to pants. And when it comes to pants or bottoms, I find that a lot of leggings, jeans, just the pants you would wear on a regular basis already offer a lot of UPF protection, even if they don't have that label. Now I do have one pair of specific UPF pants that I love. They're from Target. The Target All in Motion line, they have a lot of UV protective clothing that's very affordable, and I really like their little pants that they have. They're super comfortable. I wear them hiking, I bring them on vacation. They're awesome. Now we talked about tops, we talked about pants. I think the next thing I want to cover is hand protection, because hands get so neglected and you don't really think about your hands until maybe you're 50 or 60 and you're starting to see wrinkles and sunspots. And honestly, the skin on the back of your hands becomes very fragile. And I see that really become a problem for a lot of people as they get older, because they constantly have bruising or cuts, because you're very active with your hands. You're doing a lot of things and you really, really want to protect that skin. I'm going to give a few different glove options here because I feel like people like different things. I own all of them. So one pair of gloves that I really like are the Solbari fingerless driving gloves. They're very convenient. If you tend to overheat, the fingerless option is really nice. I really like the fingerless gloves because they're a little bit easier to use. It's easier to use your phone when you're wearing them. So these are the ones I might wear if I'm taking my son on a walk or a stroll and I know I'm not going to encounter too many people. And that's also another thing I want to say about like wearing gloves, and I'm going to get to masks and things like that, is it has to work in your life and lifestyle. Like I'm not wearing gloves every single time I'm driving, but if I'm going on a long highway drive, that's when I pull them out. It's not for like a trip to the corner store. In addition to having the fingerless gloves, I also really like the Solbari hand covers, which essentially is just almost like a mitten with the fingers cut off. So if you've ever worn something long sleeve where you have a thumb hole, it kind of mimics that. And I really like that for clothing where maybe the sleeves are a little bit short and it would feel tight to put my thumbs through those holes. These are great for that. I like to have a pair of gloves in my car, in my husband's car, in the stroller. I just don't want to be anywhere where I don't have the option for them. Like I said, I don't wear them all the time, but I like to have them there. And then I just want to mention a couple of non-clothing items that also aren't hats, because we'll get to hats in a second. So one thing I really like is my Coolie Bar bandana. This is such a versatile thing. I take it with me kind of in all my purses, because if you're out hiking or something like that, you can tie it up around the neck so that you have chest protection. If you're walking and you feel like there's a lot of sun beating down on the back of your neck or your shoulders because you don't have proper protection on, it's nice to be able to put there. It's just a very versatile thing. I also really love my Coolie Bar shawl, which is much, much bigger than the bandana. That's sort of like my travel blanket, if you will. I often bring it on airplanes because it acts as a little blanket that way, or I can use it as something to rest my head on. I also really like to keep one in the car because sometimes you're driving and you can just feel the sun beating on your legs, like if you're wearing shorts, for example, and it's really nice to be able to have something that just covers them, but is still fairly lightweight. And then something else that I have that my husband refuses to drive in the car with me when I'm wearing, but I wear it often, like home from work, especially if I've given myself a chemical peel or a laser procedure, is the Coolie Bar protective mask. This covers like your lower face and your neck. And honestly, I feel like post-pandemic, people don't give me weird looks in the car anymore, but it's the most protective thing I have. So that covers the slip into UPF Clothing. The next item up on ways to protect yourself is slop on sunscreen. But sunscreen is not the focus of this video. I have a bajillion other YouTube videos that refer to my favorite sunscreens and gives you lots of recommendations, so you can check those out if you need recs. Moving on to slap, as in slap on a hat. So when it comes to hats, not all are created equal. You're really going to be wanting to look for a hat that has a wide brim with 360-degree coverage. And I would consider a wide brim anything that's 3.5 inches or bigger. So unfortunately, something like a baseball cap does not provide enough protection. It is better than nothing, but there are so many things that are better than a baseball cap. And really the reason for that is a baseball cap protects your scalp and your part line. It protects the top of your hair and maybe your forehead and the top of your nose, but it leaves the side and bottom of your face completely unprotected. And so you're just not getting optimal protection with a baseball cap. And a lot of people think that when they're wearing a hat, like a baseball cap, that they're totally protected, and they're not. And with that, we'll get into the hat and visor recommendations. Now, one thing I'll say is some of these recommendations are a bit pricier. I tried to also include really affordable options, but I really think of a good sun hat as an investment. You certainly don't need the array or the number that I have, but I do think it's really important to buy a hat that you will actually wear. And sometimes that means investing in something that's a little bit more stylish or cool. The other thing I always try to remind people, especially my patients, is yes, a hat can feel expensive, but that is so much cheaper than laser resurfacing, than one session of Botox. I mean, it is really an investment in protection and prevention. So I'm gonna start with visors. My first recommendation is the Bluestone Sun Shield visor. If you follow me on Instagram, you've definitely seen me wear this before. I often will wear it home from clinic. And the whole reason for that is I don't really like to reapply sunscreen before I leave the office. And this allows me to totally protect my face on my 45-minute commute. A lot of people ask if I can see through it, but it's basically like large sunglasses. And if I feel like I need to get another driver's attention or something, I just lift up the visor and say, hey. Aside from using this when driving, this is also really nice if you are gardening or reading by the pool and you need to protect your face. Now, some people will love this visor and some people will think it looks absolutely absurd, but let me tell you, it'll grow on you. Another visor that I really like that's a little bit less of a fashion commitment is the San Diego Hat Company sort of signature visor. I like this visor for multiple reasons. One, it comes in a ton of different colors. Two, you can roll it or wrap it up so you can very easily store it in your car or in your purse, so you kind of have on-the-go protection. And three, it's very flexible, and I actually really like that in this visor because it's very easy to drive with and it doesn't have like a big brim in the back. So if I want to wear it while I'm driving, I can lean back in my seat without it causing any discomfort. So the next category of hats I'm going to go into are sort of like wide brim but more fashion angled, like could wear casually, but also would be fine for doing activities. One that I really love is the Lack of Color Cove hat. I've shared this on my Instagram a couple of times and it has always been sold out. So hopefully it is back in stock because it is such a cute hat. So this hat has over a 5-inch brim. It's made of raffia straw and it's just very comfortable. I really like the way that it sort of angles down. So it very much protects all parts of the face. I would say this is probably like one of my most complimented hats. When I wear it out in public, I always get asked where I got it from. And yes, it is sort of an investment hat. But I mean, if a dermatologist is going to invest in anything, a UPF hat makes sense. Another hat that I absolutely love and probably wear more than any of the other hats I'm mentioning is my Jenny Kane cotton canvas hat. I love this hat. It has a nice firm brim that's over 3 inches. It comes in multiple colors. It has a nice big brim and it is packable. Like it folds up so tiny in your luggage and it comes out looking perfect every time. I have this hat in both black and khaki, but I kind of want all the shades. Another wide brim hat that gets a lot of use from me is the Eric Javits Hampton hat. This is just sort of like a large floppy wide brim. It's very like East Coast old money vibes. And I will say for like a wide brimmed hat, this is quite packable. Like it rolls up pretty small and doesn't get distorted. Now we'll move on to wide brim hats that I would wear more during like pool activities or at the beach or hiking. So first is the Solbari wide brim beach hat. I think this is such a good hat for so many different occasions. The reason I like it so much is it has a nice downward angled wide brim, but it's not a super wide brim, so you still have some peripheral vision. I also really like it because it has a chin strap, which you can take off or move out of the way, so you don't have to have that. But if you're in windy conditions or in the ocean or the pool, having a chin strap to secure it is really helpful. I also really like that it has a little ponytail opening in the back, so if you don't like wearing your hair down around your neck, you can pull it through the back. So I like to wear this a ton when I'm in the pool with my son because I'm often just like sitting there baking in the sun, much to my chagrin, but you know, the things you do for your kids. And then it's also reversible. So if you want to have access to sort of like 2 different colors, it's almost like 2 hats in one. And I like wearing this hat in the water because it dries, it keeps its shape. It's just very easy to pack up and put in a beach bag. And because it's not as much of an investment as some of my fancier hats, I feel like I can really just use it on the go and get full use out of it. For hiking, probably one of my favorite hats is my Sunday Afternoons Latitude hat. And I think Sunday Afternoons makes some super high quality, affordable hats. And most of their hats have if not all, have a lifetime warranty. I really like this hat because it has a super wide brim. It's 3 3/4 inches in the front and then 4 inches on the sides and 4 3/4 in the back. So you have a lot of peripheral coverage. I also really like this hat because you can just tell it's very well made. There's adjustable straps on the inside so you can kind of cinch it down to your head. It has a really nice chin strap so you can secure it that way. It has a sunglasses holder if you like to put sunglasses up on top of your hat. It has like a little pocket to keep your credit card or a key. It's just a wonderful, very well made hat, especially for the price. And then another hat I really like for activities, and I feel like this one kind of bridges the gap between like fashion hat and activity hat, is the Lack of Color holiday bucket hat. So this is a very wide brimmed bucket hat that's made of a very stiff sort of cotton canvas. But the reason I like it for activities is it has a chin strap that you can tie. So it's awesome for like being on a boat or at the beach where it's a little bit more windy. You don't have to use those ties, but I think they're really cute. I also really like the stiffness of this brim because if you want to like flip it up in the front or flip it up in the back a little bit to style it differently, you totally can. And in general, I just think Lack of Color makes such amazing hats. Like if someone was like, what's one brand where you think they make super good hats that are fashionable and UV protective, Lack of Color is probably at the tippy top. So we've done slip, slop, slap. Next up is seek shade. So really with seeking shade, I don't expect you to be a hermit and live in the shadows, but I do think it's important to try to avoid direct daytime sunlight when you can. Now, I understand there are going to be situations where you're going to be cooking in the sun. For example, you're at a wedding ceremony and you're sitting in the sun. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. Those are the times where you just have to suck it up a little bit. But if there are times when you can be more protective and move yourself to the shade, like when you're walking at the farmer's market or you're walking and there's an awning available that you could be under, take advantage of that so that when there are times that you can't protect yourself, that's just a small percentage. We typically think of peak sun exposure and UV exposure hours as being between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., but you can very easily check the UV index on your phone to let you know how intense the UV radiation is where you're at that time. Now, aside from seeking shade in a shade structure or under a tree, for example, of course you can bring your own shade with you. So that could be like bringing an umbrella to the beach or a little shade structure that's portable. And I like to do this if I'm taking Theo to the pool or to the park and I'm unsure what kind of shade is going to be available. There are a lot of good little easy UPF pop-up tents that you can get on Amazon that are easy to keep in your trunk just in case. I also think it's important to note that when you're in the shade, you are not 100% protected from UV. So again, it's not about having one thing that you go all in on. It's about using a little bit of sun protective clothing, a hat, sunglasses, seeking shade, wearing sunscreen. All those things combined give you the best sun protection. And then the last sort of tenet of sun protection is slide into sunglasses. So even though I'm not an ophthalmologist or eye doctor, of course I understand that UV radiation can be harmful to the eyes in addition to being harmful to the skin. And from a dermatology perspective, the lower eyelid is where a lot of skin cancers can develop. It's also where the thinnest skin and some of the most vulnerable skin on your body resides. And the under eye area is one of the first to show premature signs of skin aging caused by UV radiation. So whether it's for skin cancer protection or pure vanity, the skin around your eyes needs to be protected. Now, not all sunglasses protect you fully from UVA and UVB damage, so it's really important that you check how the sunglasses are labeled to ensure you are going to be adequately protected. It's also important to be aware that darker lenses don't always offer more protection. Now, even if the lenses themselves offer UVA and UVB protection, it's also important to look at the style overall. If you have tiny little lenses, of course the area that they're covering is going to protect you, but you're leaving a lot of skin around your eyes vulnerable. So ideally, we are looking for larger sunglasses or even wraparound style so that you're getting protection not just from the front, but also from the side UV. In addition to protecting you from the sun, these larger sunglasses are also going to protect you from things like allergens or irritants in the environment, as well as wind. So that is sort of my essential summary of non-sunscreen sun protection. If you have hats or UPF clothing that you absolutely love, again, let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next time.